once upon a time, upon a small and sunlit island that lay like a warm and golden heart on the wide breast of the Bay of Naples, there were 3 people who made a home together. Hermione Delary, a woman of brave and tender spirit, her daughter Vere, all quickness and fire and gentle curiosity, and Gaspar, the devoted, steady-hearted Sicilian who watched over them like a kindly sentinel. This place, the Casa del Mare, stood on a little rock, touched by the sea, and watched over by the patient statue of San Francesco on his pedestal, whose lamp burned faithfully when the world around was full of storm, and whose presence seemed to bless the small family that lived beneath the sky. On golden mornings, the sea lay like melted glass. The light would come and pour over every living thing, giving the leaves a green so soft you wanted to rest your hand upon them, and the water a blue that looked as if one could step into it and find a whole other quiet world. Morning after morning, Vere would run down the steps to the beach with laughter and handfuls of sunlight, and Gaspar would take the boat and row her out into a small world of waves and rock pools where the little sea creatures hid, each like a tiny treasure in the lighthouse of the shallows. And when evening came, the horizon would close like a storybook. The sky would learn a new color, and the music of the bay, some street song, or the low call of a fisherman, would bubble up like a gentle lullaby. Life at the Casa del Mare was full of small, shining things. A pastry pulled from a paper cone could make 2 people smile the way the sea makes a fisherman smile. A pack of cigarettes, presented with a girl's innocent mischief to a brown, beaming boy in a boat, could set off a string of bright encounters and the tiny whirl of friendships, and sometimes a single voice, raised in a careless little song about a far place, Napoli Bella Napoli, or a Mergelina, would thread its way through the sun and catch someone's ear and heart. If the sea had a way of placing its fingers gently on a life, that was the way of this house. It let its small inhabitants feel the ocean's care, and yet taught them, in its own hush, to keep part of their feelings private and precious. Hermione, who had the ancient quiet and the modern bright mind both living inside her, loved the sea with the melancholy of someone who had loved long and had been hurt by loss. Her husband Morris had been a sun-like spirit, gone now in the ways of the world, and Hermione carried his memory wrapped inside her the way the island keeps a shell close to its center. She did not hide that memory. She kept it on a small table, a photograph within a silver frame, a soft, faithful thing that sat by the lamp. And yet she was full of life. She loved to listen, to talk, and to hand small kindnesses like tokens out of an unending generosity toward the people around her. Vere, the daughter, had her father's sunny ease and her mother's restless, questioning intelligence all threaded up together. She was 16 and full of green, burning curiosities. She liked to run along the cliff walk, or to lie in the boat with the awning up and a book or a page of her own to fold. Sometimes she felt a hunger both for stillness and for adventure, stillness to think and put words together, and adventure so the words would have something to say. She loved the sea as if it were a secret book, whose pages she wanted to touch again and again. Gaspard was a man of few words, but enormous steadiness. He had been with Hermione through storms that had once shaken their lives, and had known loyalties so deep they did not need to be spoken. He had come to the island with memories of other coasts, and of a past he scarcely told of, and he read each day as it arrived. He boiled coffee when it needed boiling. He shut shutters when the wind came, and when the night felt too full of secrets, he kept watch, a simple, sure guard. He loved the family as if the house itself were a ship, and his duty to steer it through any weather into that quiet little world. And yet worlds change, even little ones, they're entered, as things enter at the sound of a new bell. A few others. A bright Sicilian young man, Isidoro Panacci, full of laughter, and of the springtime way of thinking that everything can be caught and held in the blink of an eye. A sea boy called Ruffo, who sang with a kind of raw, honest joy, and a woman named Peppina, who carried on her cheek the mark of a cruel thing that had happened in her life. That small new company changed the pattern of days. For joy in the island, there is room enough, in fact. But when something new comes to live near the tender things, it sometimes awakens watchfulness, or confusion, or questions about what matters most. On this evening, the air was the soft kind of summer air that makes even the hardest persons feel a little younger. The island sat with a small lamp glowing on San Francesco, and the faraway lights of the city were a necklace on the line of the coast. Hermione, who had been reading quietly, found herself thinking of old times and of new things at once. She had been carrying a long memory like a tapestry in her chest, the memory of a life that was once a different color, and had sometimes wished that she could lay it down without feeling bereft. The longing for peace had been a steady hum in her mind. But then little things happened. People she barely knew came into the picture and left their own prints there. A boy sang a song. A boat moored at the pool of San Francesco, and the sound of oars made a small, patient music. A letter had come that morning from Artois, her old and closest friend, saying he would be on the bay for the summer. And as all matters of the heart will do it, this only warmed some unspoken hope inside Hermione, which in turn made her feel closer and a touch more frightened. Do you remember how a breeze can change the scent of the roses, and then the memory of a whole day? At nights like this, the roses smell like the sea. At night, a person can hear their own throat and feel their own heartbeat as if for the first time. Hermione sat thinking, and then she did something she didn't often do. She took a small step toward a question that had lived inside her for a long time. She opened, without quite meaning to, a part of her feelings to the light, and not too far away. Under that very light, a secret that had once been sewn up for many years was slowly being revealed. Of course, it was not a reckless revelation all at once. The heart does not open like a door. It opens like a season. When Artois, who had come from the mainland that particular evening, found Hermione had been worried. He sat quietly, not at all angry, but absolutely steady. He was a man used to reading people's faces. Hermione, with all her many loyalties and her long and tender past, felt a pang of something like jealousy. That's a delicate word, but you will know what I mean. The heart stirs when everything you have been cannot quite be the only thing a loved one is carrying in his or her hands. So they spoke softly, carefully, and each had to tell the truth of his or her own heart. That took great courage. When words bring in truth, sometimes a room is changed as if by dawn. There were ideas. I chose you when I had to. I thought it right. I was swept. And you did so much for me. And I might have been misread. All the ways that love can explain itself to itself and to another. Hermione said that she had been very fond of Morris, and the day he left had been a day that changed her life forever. She had given up her path to be with others. She had been, quite honestly, the person she was. And sometimes a person who gives a great deal also needs to be given to. Artois listened as only a very wise person can, with patience and a certain great respect. And when he spoke, he was full of honesty and humility that sometimes hides as strength, a strength that was tested and remade that night. The sea was not far away from their voices. It was there, and it listened. The people of the island feel the sea listening. The sea keeps what it hears. It is like a large, silent diary. It remembers the lines of people's lives the way the moon remembers the tides. And so it was that as they talked, as they told their true feelings to each other, more than a few people were listening in the hush. The walls, the lamp, San Francesco on his pedestal, and the faraway lights across the bay. As the talk ended, the mist between them began to clear. Hermione's fierce shadow of fear was pushed back by light, and Artois' quiet fear turned to tenderness. They were not the same people they had been before the conversation, but like trees in spring. They both looked as if they would be fuller and more steady now for what had been said. In truth, it is a brave thing to ask for protection when you are frightened, and to accept when it is offered. We all grow older and wilder and kinder. The house on the island had known storms before. It knew them also that night in the hearts of the people who loved it. Outside, in the silver hour, there was a simple kind of music, the sound of oars, a far-off song. At the edge of the pool of San Francesco, a fisher boy named Ruffo had just bent over his oars and pulled, bringing the small boat into the still cove. Ruffo was a bright young fellow, the sort of boy whose laugh comes easy and whose eyes, like the sea, were clear and a little fierce with all the liveliness of his days. He had been a kind of sunbeam that morning in the neighborhood, and he had told the story of his home, his mother and her troubles, to Hermione, because that is what happens when a person's heart opens. Other hearts come near without being shy. He spoke of the harshness he had seen in the world and the small things that kept his family together. Hermione listened. This listening, that is, a warm and true listening, is as powerful as giving bread to a hungry man. Some small things kept moving in the rooms of the Casa del Mare. The silver that the light touched, the green parrot that bobbed its head and made a strange, scoffing little noise, the lemon doll called a factura of death, which meant to the people a bad wish, and which had been made in ignorance and fear to try to hurt another. That little lemon with the nails in it is a strange thing to you perhaps, but in some little towns and many old corners of the world, people have had strange ways of saying they are angry by making an object that stands as a word. It is small things like this that can bear heavy meaning. One small and terrible evening, when shadows had been heavy on the rooms and the air had been like the inside of a slow oven, Hermione had found in the Casa del Mare a small lemon pierced with nails. She had gathered it up and felt the weird, cold knowledge that objects sometimes carry. For a long while, the lemon lay like a little strange pebble in a place it would not belong, and a story began to move. Perhaps in such a story, the only real vehicle is the human heart. But the hearts were afraid. They were unsure, and so they took long paths around the problem instead of a straight one. For that is what we do. A fear was born in a corner and set about to gather other fears. The lemon now sits in the sea as a small thing that mean to hurt nothing more than some small darkness in the mind. But that moved a whole life as well. There were other days of worry. There were nights when the sky thickened and the sea seemed to keep a secret. Each person threaded their way through the hush as best they could. Hermione went to the window and watched. Vere put up her hair and read where she had always read. And Gaspar, strong as the rock, but quiet as the sea is quiet, kept his watch as he had always done. There are moments in life when 2 or 3 words are not enough, and the whole slow story needs the hour and the moon to tell it. So it was, and yet life was full of small gentlenesses. There had been a time when Hermione had gone looking among the rows of houses in the harbor to find a mother who had been in trouble. She had carried a small handful of coins and brought herself, not in judgment, but in a very plain tenderness, to a small doorway where grief had its quiet, and where the parrot shook its green head upon a board above the bed. You see, everyone in this tale is just as ordinary and amazing as you and I. They are the folks who sweep up the hearth, who bring out the coffee, who look after a curtain for a lady, who likes the windows open to the air at dawn. They read, and they do not always know the lines of their own lives. Sometimes they mistake the small thing for the great thing, and sometimes the great thing slips away. But the truth is that when hearts are honest and kind, they can help each other, even through the storm of nights, when the worst of the storms seem to have passed, and the sea to have quieted down into more usual softness. The little group in the cottage began to mend things. Nothing dramatic or perfect at once, but the steady practice of small forgivenesses, the slow building of an honest peace. If you have ever sat at a bedside with another person who is not feeling well, you know the unspoken gentleness of that place, how a hand will be taken and set on pillow, not to impress anyone, but simply to offer company and warmth. Hermione and Artois, Vere and Gaspar, Ruffo, and even the woman who bore a mark upon her cheek, all moved toward those small morning acts. They are the real work of living, the careful shaping of a daily kindness. Over time, the days came that glowed with calm. They took boat rides, friendly and long, where the little wind would lift their hair. They walked along the cliff, where fennel sprays bowed like little hymn books to the sea. And once the festival and the crowd had passed, the little island lay again, like a pebble, in the wide wash of morning. A place where things could be repaired slowly and surely. Hermione would stand in the shade and read aloud sometimes, and Artois would take the little poems and make them into new things. Vere would write, and Artois would read, and sometimes Hermione would listen in that gentle way that takes no possession, but gives room for gifts to grow. And Gaspar would come in after a long day to make hot tea, and to sit near the table, and to listen. It is in these small works that houses finally become homes. A little like a fox knows the crevice where it can hide, but also the field where it will run. It is often true that when the storm has finished, the air seems much clearer. People feel their lives have been changed. They have learned that they must be open and brave and steady, because life will call upon them so to be. And so in this tale, they walked forward, hand in hand, not because their problems were small, but because they were determined to be frank and to go forward slowly with one another. Perfection was not their aim, rather truth, and that is an even truer kind of beauty. Sometimes after dinner, when the lamps were lit and the sea had settled down like a person at rest, Artois and Hermione would sit quietly and talk about many things that are worth talking about. Success in art, the way words can be like ropes or ladders, the meaning of mercy, and the ways of children. Vere would go out into the moon and come back with stories of bright fish and the sound the oars make in the dark. Gaspar would chop wood and make a tea, and Ruffo would hum his work song as he hooked in the nets by the pool. Above them, all the statue of San Francesco stood, watching like a faithful old guardian. The people of the island were most often very ordinary folk, and ordinary people are often as brave as kings in everyday things. So ends, for tonight, our tale, with the Casa del Mare sitting in the gentle light of an evening, guarded by the saint, warmed by the friendship of people who know each other's hearts, almost by feeling rather than by words. Hermione once lived a life that seemed as if it could not be mended, and yet through patience, truth, and a willingness to listen, everything found its place again. The hurt, though present, was made whole as best it could be. The secrets found their places. Light found its way through the blinds, and small human hands took up the careful, slow work of being kind and keeping one another company. And so beneath the watch of the saint, they slept and dreamed as seas in summer dream of calmer days, of books gently written and read, of songs sung lightly by boys with sun in their hair, and the small, faithful, ever-true occupation of making each other's lives kinder and brighter. If you ever go to sleep with a thought of Sicily and the sea and a cottage on a little island, you will feel that kind of peace too. Night is a soft keeper of all that we carry. If you rest now, and let the gentle tide of sleep carry you, the sea will hush you as the Casa del Mare was hushed. Close your eyes and let the warm sound of a faraway oar and the remembered scent of ginestra and rose and sea spray carry you into a dream where friends keep watch, and the heart is brave enough to say the truth. Good night. Let the bay sing you gently away.